The past 10 years have been some of the most interesting when it came to animated television. After the dark zone that was the last half of the 2000s, it seemed the decade came in with so much creativity and imagination that it jump-started a new animation renaissance. From Cartoon Network, which just in 2009 put out several live-action shows, turning out both Adventure Time and regular show, the Hub debuted and gave birth to a cultural phenomenon, and over the rest of the decade, we got not only a lot of good new material, but also some really good reboots of shows from previous decades. And with the rise of streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime, they could push the boundaries even more. Of course, not everything was good, but even the worst shows usually had some kind of imagination or surreal quality to them. And now that the decade is over, I think we should look over my 10 favorites. The only rules are they have to be a series that started airing between January 1st, 2010 and December 31st, 2019. Of course, most of this list is 2015 and earlier because I really haven't had a lot of time to watch new shows the past few years, so if you have any suggestions of a show I don't have on here, let me know, maybe I'll give it a shot. Other than that, it's completely free range. It can be aimed at kids or adults as its main demographic, and be either a cable show or a streaming show. So let's begin. These are my top 10 favorite animated shows of the 2010s.
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 10.
Infinity Train, a 5-night special event, starts Monday, August 5th at 7:30.
This show has only had one season so far, and yet I feel it needs a spot on this list. Airing on Cartoon Network, it follows a young girl named Tulip who's having trouble in her personal life, and when she tries to run off to camp, she boards a mysterious train, where each car is like its own different world. I decided to give this a watch just back in October, and I was surprised how creative, surreal, funny, and mature it was. The characters are people I want to follow. I love Tulip, she's smart and nice, but can be easily frustrated. She felt like a real kid. One is just hilarious. You got the positive side that always is up for an adventure, and the negative side that has some pretty dark jokes surrounding him. And then you got Atticus, a corgi played by Ernie Hudson. Do I need to say any more? The worlds that are on this train are imaginative and fun. There's a sort of mystery about what's going on and how she can get off. The animation is great, the voice acting is great, but what really surprised me was how mature it can be. Tulip is going through some tough times at home, with both her parents recently getting divorced, and the way the train uses that is fascinating. I especially love episode 5, The Cat's Car, which involves memories and how we can look at the past with more positive feelings than we actually felt at the time. Because it's only had one season so far, that's why it's only number 10, but if season 2 can be better, I may have to add an asterisk.
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 9. How the hell can this show be as good as it is? By all accounts, I should hate it. The main character is one of the most hateable, loathsome human beings I've ever seen. He abuses his best friend, causes crime after crime, and gets away with it. And yet, it's great! The reason this works where so many others fail is that it manages to make the thing Dan is angry at more hateable than him. I wanted him to get back at modern art and their pretentious way of selling low-effort trash. I wanted him to get back at the mall Santa for being a piece of shit who doesn't care about Christmas. Plus, Dan is pretty pathetic. He lives in a shit apartment, drives a shit car, and life continues to torment him. So even though he is doing all this awful stuff, it's not like he's going back to live a very comfortable life. The comedy is great, featuring a lot of good dialogue, and several times I nearly fell out of my chair laughing. Dan, Chris, and Elise all work well off each other in an entertaining way. It's still one of the most relatable shows I can think of. We've all wanted to take revenge on those little annoyances of everyday life, and here's a show where you can see that fantasy come true.
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 8. This is a show that got consistently better with each season, and it already started out pretty good, but it just kept building this mythology and expanding on the world. It felt like something out of classic fantasy literature. I got invested in what was gonna happen. The twist surprised me. This was basically my Game of Thrones, and Like Game of Thrones, it appears a lot of people were disappointed with the ending, but I liked it. But it also had likable characters to go along with it too. I love Star's cheery attitude and her friendly demeanor. I like Marco's sort of trying to be cool even though he has no idea what's going on thing. Her parents are fun, their friends are funny, the villains are delightfully over the top and sometimes kind of creepy. The animation is beautiful and feels like if you took Adventure Time and Steven Universe and smashed them together. The bond between Star and Marco is really sweet. It is pretty obvious from the beginning that they will like each other, but the journey through it all is nice and heartwarming and just so cute. It's also funny, and I like that it can slip back and forth between slice of life fun and continuity driven dramatic stories. And finally, while this may have little to do with the show itself, it has my favorite theme song of any show on this list.
It's gonna get a little weird, gonna get a little wild. I ain't from round here, I'm from another dimension. There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 7. Alright, ignore the dumbass fans who harassed fast food employees and also the Nazis. This is a great show. Unlike so many other adult animated shows that feel like they should be comedies and nothing else, this is a lot like Futurama, and then it's a comedy first, but also a science fiction show, and a great science fiction show. All the creative tech and adventures these guys can go on, from going inside the body of a hobo that houses an amusement park, to a miniature universe and a car battery, to a post-apocalyptic Earth, and all the stories are legit suspenseful and well written. It's not just a backdrop for jokes. They do unpack the characters and there are consequences for what they do there. They have a lot of creative ideas, like a place where a force field protects you from dying, or alien parasites that make your mind think that you've known them forever. The animation is good, and I like that it doesn't rely on gross out, which again, so many adult cartoons feel the need to do. Rick and Morty are great together, and I actually find it funny when Rick treats Morty like shit. Rick is basically a narcissist asshole, which so many people don't seem to get, or at least don't realize that it's bad. I like Summer and don't even mind Beth and Jerry like a lot of other people do. And the show is just funny. Not always, but I can't think of an episode that didn't give me at least a few laughs. And even if they aren't that funny, there's at least a creative story. I know there are dumbasses who make the show seem like jerk-off material for Nazis, but it actually is great. It's a lot like Fight Club in that way.
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 6. This and Adventure Time were the two shows that kind of kickstarted the TV animation renaissance. And while I like and respect Adventure Time, I never got into it that much. Regular Show, on the other hand, I absolutely love. Imagine Beavis and Butthead, but a little more child-friendly and with more surreal humor. Most episodes do follow a certain formula. It starts out pretty mundane, just an average day at the park, but then by the end, somehow they will have to fight something. And the journey from point A to point B was usually always a blast. Like, how do we get from Mordecai and Rigby setting up chairs to them fighting a video game monster? I really like Mordecai and Rigby as characters. They're slackers and kind of dude bros, but they aren't stupid or annoying. They're two dudes I'd like to hang out with, and their friendship is believable. The two make up for each other's flaws. Mordecai is smarter and more responsible, so he can help keep Rigby from going too far in certain places, but he's also kind of shy and doesn't take many risks, which is how Rigby can help him out. I got invested in Mordecai's love life. I like Rigby's over-the-top whining. The supporting cast is great, from the unstable muscle man, likable tough guy Skips, and easily angered Benson. It's a funny show that is almost always entertaining. As it went on, they had more continuity-driven stories and arcs, but I like that it never fully changed. It always felt like the same show with the same charm, even when they went to space. Most of the shows on this list have ended, and almost all of them had pretty good series finales. This and Star Vs. being two we've looked at so far. And as for another,
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
number 5.
Earth. Fire.
Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite animated show of all time. So no, I wouldn't say Legend of Korra is as good, but I'm still amazed it turned out as good as it did given how bad Nick treated it. From rushing productions to announcing air dates a week in advance to just dumping the episodes online, even if you aren't a fan of the show, you can agree it deserved better than what it got. Personally, I think this is a really solid follow-up. Korra is a fun character, she's like polar opposite of Aang, much more willing to fight and more pessimistic, but that just makes her growth through the series more interesting. Mako is cool, Bolin is funny, and Asami is fantastic. And then there's all the supporting characters: Varric, Julie, Tenzin, Eskin, Desna, Kai, Lin, Opal. They're all great. Then there's the villains. Ignoring the one from book 2, you got Amon, who is horrifying, Zahir and Kuvira, who are both intimidating, and with all three, you kind of get where they're coming from. The action is great, the animation is great, and it's a show that in its last 2 seasons managed to fix a lot of its flaws. And we got more world building, and getting little glimpses of what happened to Team Avatar left me feeling nostalgic. Sure, it wasn't as good as the original, but it's still great. And I think it managed to have its own feel while still paying homage to the best animated series of all time.
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 4.
Are the crystal gems?
Steven Universe is one of those shows that could only have come out in the 2010s. As much as I love these other shows, they could have existed in the 2000s or the 90s. This show, with all the LGBTQ+ representations and symbolism, could not. And while that's great, a show being progressive doesn't automatically make it good. This show just feels different from any other series. It kind of has a relaxed tone to it. Even though there is a lot of action, the colors, the animation style, the music, the pacing just gives it a laid-back feeling. And I like that. I like the ensemble cast too. I mean, it mostly focuses on Steven and the 3 gems, but there are a lot of supporting characters in Beach City. Steven is charming, optimistic, Garnet is hilariously deadpan and tough, Pearl is overly protective and caring, and Amethyst is fun and energetic. And I especially love Steven's dad. He's just a good guy who loves his son and wants what's best for him. The world building is wonderful. I love seeing all the things these gems can do, like fusing. The mythology is interesting and leads to a lot of twists and character dilemmas. And then there's the music, which is gorgeous. So beautiful to listen to. It's one of the best Cartoon Network shows, and in my opinion, their best show of the decade.
Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl, and Steven! There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 3. This has my pick for not only the best adult animated show of the decade, but also the best show Netflix has done. This is the most 2010 show on the list. It is so entrenched in the culture and timing of this decade that it'll act like a time capsule 20 years from now when 2010's nostalgia is the hot trend. I adore pretty much everything about this show. The main character is a depressed has-been actor who was popular in a show 20 years ago and now is severely depressed. I myself have never been diagnosed with depression, but I can empathize with feeling like your best days are behind you and nothing matters. I don't think it's a coincidence I started watching this shortly after I graduated college. The other characters are great too. Diane, who wants to make the world a better place even though she is kind of a mess herself. Mr. Peanut Butter, who is almost always happy even though he's basically a man-child. Todd, who managed to be one of the few asexual characters in television. And Princess Caroline, who spent most of her life trying to be the best in her career that she let the rest of her life pass her by. There is heavy stuff in here and it tackles some of the biggest topics of the 2010s, from gun violence to Me Too. And it does it in a smart and complex way. It doesn't just say guns are bad or sexual harassment is just a perverted man abusing a woman. The music and animation are able to create some good atmosphere and the voice acting is perfect. And with all that, it never forgets to be funny. There's some wild stuff that happens in this, but it never clashes with the dramatic tone. As of me recording this, the last half of the final season hasn't been released yet, but if they stick the landing, this could be one of the most solid shows ever made.
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 2.
My little pony, ah.
This This show is a miracle. Not because it's a good show based on the My Little Pony toy line, I can accept that, but because it went on for 9 seasons and kept a consistent quality. And not just that, it did several things that normally derail a show. The original creator stopped being part of it, and yet it didn't go downhill. It gave Twilight wings at the end of the 3rd season, which should have been the jumping the shark moment, and yet the show overall was better after that. They brought in a baby character, something that started the downfall of the Fairly Odd Parents, and yet she's not in it much, and when she is, she's adorable. They added 6 new supporting characters in the 8th season, and they gave us some of the best episodes. This show is fantastic. I love the characters, the animation is beautiful, the voice acting's great, and it's just so freaking cute. And everyone has their specific reasons for loving it. Some like it for the slice of life stories, some like the character interactions, some come from the fact that it's adorable. Me personally, I think I like the comedy the most. This is a really funny show. The characters' personalities work off each other so well that every episode gives me at least a few chuckles, even the worst ones. And some had me on the floor. I've talked about this show so much that I won't let this go on too long, but Friendship is Magic is a show that proves you can take something that was solely meant to sell toys and make it truly special.
Do they know you are my very best friends?
Before we get to number 1, I have some honorable mentions.
We'll be there.
A really just charming show with great characters and is sort of like BoJack in that it's covered in 2010's culture. A really funny show with a very optimistic main character at a time when we really need one. Atmospheric, deep, and at times kind of creepy. It may have been short, but damn was it good. Cute, charming, and I love the fantasy feel of it. Kind of takes me back to the stories I came up with when I was younger. This show only lasted a season and is by far the most adult on this list, but I love the hyper antics and it does a great job of being funny, dramatic, and creates 2 very well-rounded female leads. Not only is the show funny, but sometimes the dramatic parts are good enough that I wanted to cry. The action is great and the theme song is one of the best. Anyway, on to...
There's an awful lot of awful things we could be thinking of, but for just one day, let's only think about love.
Number 1. Yeah, obvious choice is obvious. But can you blame me? Everything about this show is so good. The animation is great, the humor is hilarious, and the stories are creative and fun. It covers a bunch of different paranormal stuff from ghosts to aliens to zombies. And the mystery, the main mystery that encompassed the whole show, is not only well written, but it all ends satisfactorily. When even shows made for adults end up disappointing people, here we have a Disney show that brought up questions, answered them, and even gave some genuinely surprising twists. But it also has characters I like watching. Dipper is likable and charming in his awkwardness, Mabel is hilarious, Stan is great in just how greedy he is, Seuss is so lovable because he's trying so hard, Wendy is cool, and I love all the citizens of this town. It had a really solid first season and then an even better second season. The villains are great, the music is great, and the finale was so perfect that it made me cry. I've said the ending is the most important part of a show, and a lot of these shows had great endings, but I think more than all of them, Gravity Falls showed how to do it right. I love this show, and in my opinion, it should go down as one of the best television shows ever made. Well, that ends my favorite animated shows of the decade. Again, if there isn't a show on here you think is great, let me know. I'll try and check it out if I haven't. So join me back on my main channel later this month where we'll talk about pop songs. And I'll be back with more Fixing the Flops in April. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.